extracting dependent, independent, mediating, and moderating variables, along with developing a conceptual framework and hypotheses from a literature review, involves carefully analyzing existing studies to identify key factors that influence your research topic. These variables help structure your study and explain the relationships you aim to investigate, while the conceptual framework visually or logically organizes these connections. Hypotheses are predictions based on these relationships, grounded in evidence from the literature. The dependent variable is the outcome or effect you are trying to study. It changes depending on other factors. For example, if your thesis is about how leadership style impacts employee performance, the dependent variable would be employee performance, as it is the result you are measuring. To identify it in the literature review, look for studies that describe outcomes related to your topic. For instance, Smith, 2020, found that transformational leadership significantly improves employee productivity. Here, employee productivity is the dependent variable. The independent variable is the factor you believe influences or causes changes in the dependent variable. In the leadership example, the independent variable would be leadership style, as it is the factor being tested for its impact. To extract independent variables, look for studies that examine causes or predictors. For instance, Johnson, 2019, showed that participative leadership leads to higher team engagement. In this case, participative leadership is the independent variable. A mediating variable explains how or why the independent variable affects the dependent variable. It acts as a bridge between the two. For example, in the leadership and employee performance study, employee motivation could be a mediating variable. If the literature suggests that leadership style improves motivation, which then enhances performance, you might find statements like Brown 2021 demonstrated that transformational leadership boosts employee motivation, which subsequently improves productivity. This indicates that motivation mediates the relationship between leadership style and performance. A moderating variable changes the strength or direction of the relationship between the independent and dependent variables. It shows when or under what conditions the effect occurs. For example, organizational culture might moderate the impact of leadership style on employee performance. If the literature suggests statements like, Lee found that the positive effects of transformational leadership on productivity are stronger in collaborative organizational cultures, then organizational culture is a moderating variable. Moderators help explain variations in results across different contexts. Once you identify these variables, you can build your conceptual framework, which visually or logically organizes their relationships. For example, if your research is about leadership style and employee performance, your conceptual framework might include arrows showing how leadership style affects employee performance, with employee motivation and organizational culture influencing the relationship. You could describe it like this. This study proposes that leadership style directly impacts employee performance, with motivation acting as a mediator and organizational culture moderating the strength of this relationship. After establishing your conceptual framework, the next step is to develop hypotheses, which are predictions based on the relationships you identified. Hypotheses should be clear, testable, and grounded in the literature. For example, based on the leadership example, you might write H1, transformational leadership positively impacts employee performance. If you include a mediator, you could write H2, transformational leadership improves employee performance through increased motivation. For a moderator, you might write H3, the positive relationship between transformational leadership and employee performance is stronger in collaborative organizational cultures. Hypotheses provide a roadmap for testing the relationships in your study. To extract these elements, carefully analyze the literature review for studies that discuss relationships between variables. For example, if your thesis is about the effect of social media usage on academic performance, the dependent variable could be academic performance. The independent variable might be social media usage. A mediating variable could be time spent studying, and a moderating variable might be type of social media platform. You could find statements like, Smith found that excessive social media use reduces academic performance by decreasing study time, And Johnson noted that the negative effects of social media on grades are stronger for platforms focused on entertainment compared to educational platforms. From these findings, you could create a conceptual framework and hypotheses such as H1, social media usage negatively impacts academic performance. 2, study time mediates the relationship between social media usage and academic performance. And H3, the negative relationship between social media usage and academic performance is stronger for entertainment-focused platforms. In summary, extracting variables involves identifying outcomes, dependent variables, causes, independent variables, mechanisms, mediating variables, and conditions, moderating variables, based on evidence from the literature. The conceptual framework organizes these relationships, while hypotheses predict them. For example, in a study about exercise and mental health, the dependent variable might be mental health, the independent variable, exercise frequency, the mediating variable, stress reduction, and the moderating variable, age group. A conceptual framework would show how these elements connect, and hypotheses would predict the relationships, such as H1, regular exercise improves mental health, or H2, stress reduction mediates the relationship between exercise and mental health. By carefully analyzing the literature, you can clearly define these components and build a strong foundation for your thesis.